first sip of coffee for the day. So we'll see.
First sip. All right. Well, I resisted doing a second cup, so I'm still doing first cup. So let's see. It says we're live. Now I'm gonna share. I'm gonna do something else. So I always have trouble finding it, Sean. You're always quicker than me. Did you already start your watch party?
No, I'm trying to.
Oh, okay. Good. I'm not the only slow one. No, this is the wrong one. Come on. Where's the Miss You Alliance one? Thanks for everyone joining in. As we start off the Palmer and Holsclaw show, Geoff is having serious issues. Geoff is me. Serious issues sharing. Here we go. I found it. Here we go. If I don't share it, no one will find it. I'm just kidding. There we go. Dang it. I should share your watch party, Sean, because I found it.
Well, I just launched it, so
yeah, I know.
I think maybe Facebook may be having some trouble this morning.
Okay, we're gonna blame this all on Facebook.
Yeah, Facebook maybe needs my cup of coffee that I hadn't had either. So
yeah, I think so. All right, well, I'm just gonna share a different one because I can't. Maybe it's Miss You Alliance because I can't find the Miss You Alliance one.
Oh well, that's the one I shared. So
all right,
it was over in the top corner, not on the main page. So who knows? We're just rocking and rolling
as we go.
Right.
Oh, shoot. All right.
I mean, I'm sure our family members are geared up to watch us.
Yeah, my mom's watching, so she's good. So it's no problem there. Join us live. Okay. And I think our intro music's about to end because I've never taken so long to get this started. Okay, post. This is one part of our show production I'm still working on. Okay, I'm done.
For those folks out there who know production and they want to help us out.
Todd found us. Okay, Todd. I'm so glad you found it. Oh, see, the music even died before I told it to. That's embarrassing.
Well, it's perfect. That it faded out right when now we know exactly how long.
Okay, here we go. 10 people are watching. I'm gonna drop.
All right.
Boom. Welcome to the Palmer and Holsclaw show. Nobody could see it, but I could see it. Sean was dancing during the intro. He was digging the music.
See, that's crazy because when that intro plays, I can't see you and I can't see me. I just get the graphic. So
I have all the power. I have everything. This is the Palmer and Holsclaw show. I am signed in on our streaming platform, so I get to see everything all the time. So Sean, I guess, does not get to see it all. But we are bridging faith and life in this show. We're trying to get below the headlines and beyond the party lines. We're broadcasting in partnership with Miss You Alliance. And I guess what we need to ask to start off is, what are the best ways that you all find the show live? How is it that you find it? How is it that you get reminders? And then maybe Sean and I could start actually doing that with. So Todd, I think Linda shows up quite a bit. I know there's a Jeff or some other people. How do you find the show on your devices, browsers, phones? And then maybe Sean and I can start doing this. Why don't you guys start adding that to the comments if you could. But today we're talking about deconstruction, deconstructing faith. Ways, the title technically is Ways to Deconstruct as Detoxing Your Faith. And what do we mean by that? So I got this quick example, and then we're going to jump right in. Is a couple years ago, about 5 years ago, I started, and I know this is not like a health show, but I started getting these rashes on my back. And I was like, what the heck is going on? I wasn't sure if I got like some poison oak or poison ivy or something. And my wife was like, you're probably like reacting to something you ate. You're having this like toxic reaction because your skin is like this giant organ that, you know, helps get rid of toxins and things like that. And I was like, whoa, I don't know about that. So then I ended up going to a chiropractor, and the chiropractor was like, yeah, you're actually allergic to gluten and dairy. And I was like, wait a second, do you realize I eat gluten and dairy every day of my life? This is literally what. And he's like, well, you're 35 and I guess your body decided that it doesn't want that anymore. And then I was like, did you know that beer is made out of gluten? And the chiropractor was like, I do know that. So
as a matter of fact.
So anyhow, so I got rid of just about all dairy, and I got rid of most gluten. We won't talk too much about which gluten I have retained. So, but I think this is an example of how, like, sometimes things that were helpful in our lives, in our, you know, our digestive lives, can become toxic after a while, and they build up. And I think that there is toxins or it's kind of a toxic nature to the way that we sometimes talk about faith, whether you talk about fundamentalism, and really there's kind of a fundamentalism on the left too. And so there's this process of detoxifying or deconstructing faith. Who out there has heard friends or themselves have even said something to the effect of, I'm deconstructing my faith. I know so-and-so, my sister-in-law, my brother, you know, they're in a time of deconstructing their faith. Sean, have you heard people use that kind of language?
Yeah, and here people talk about deconstructing their faith a lot, but mostly in my experience, Jeff, it's after they have done it or significantly down the road, because no one kind of wakes up one day, right, and says, you know what I think I should do? Let me set on a years-long, lifelong project of deconstructing my faith. Like, it first kind of arrives for everyone as a crisis, right? And then it's how do they handle that? How do they handle that crisis is the process of deconstruction, but you don't know that's the process of deconstruction until you are a good ways down the line in deconstructing your faith. And I also want to say that anytime you're in Houston, you're welcome to our house, obviously, but my daughter is dairy-free and my wife is gluten-free. So we have plenty of things that you can eat here,
Nice.
but not the thing of the gluten that you've probably retained.
Well, thank you for that act of hospitality. It's very generous of you. So on Wednesday, just a promo, on Wednesday, we are going to focus significantly on what prompts, or like the crisis of faith, what creates the journey for kind of moving into a time of deconstruction. And then on Friday, we're going to talk about, this is a whole week on deconstructing faith. On Friday, we're going to talk about, well, what is the difference between deconstructing faith, what is sometimes called the dark night of the soul, which is like God's silence or God's absence, and then just outright depression. How do those things fit together? Are they the same thing, and are they different? So this whole week, we're going to be talking about these things.
So Jeff, from your perspective, you know, we know friends, especially as you grow up, and the crisis kind of begins. We'll talk about this on Wednesday, when the world that you inherit or the world that you inhabit no longer works for you, whatever works means. I mean, we kind of throw that. It's a really weighty word that people kind of toss around. From your perspective, you deal with a lot of students. Many of us, especially people who go into theological fields, it's really when we enter into graduate school, when we go to seminary, that deconstruction starts to take place. You know, in her book, The Preaching Life, Barbara Brown Taylor talks about being introduced in seminary to document hypothesis theory for the first time. And it's just like, you know, like it feels like your world's falling apart. So help us understand what deconstructing your faith is. And how would someone know, like, hey, this is what I'm doing? Because it doesn't feel like that experientially. So help us with that.
Well, so deconstruction, just starting with the term, it's kind of comes from the 60s and 70s from Jacques Derrida, a French postmodern philosopher. And he thought of deconstruction as a way of peeling back kind of the known or accepted meanings in a text, So whether it's the Bible or just some classic work, whether it's the Constitution of the United States or the Declaration of Independence or any kind of text, as a way of kind of peeling back the kind of known and understood meanings, and then kind of getting below to the things that maybe we take for granted, or the hidden presuppositions, or the hidden kind of ways that power is at work in these types of things. And so it's kind of what is sometimes called a hermeneutics of suspicion, which is like, what have I missed? Who's tricking me? Who's benefiting from the certain kind of ways that these texts or these ideas are being used? So deconstruction was a way of kind of getting at those things. And then and that sounds super negative and critical, but he also had a sense that you were reconstructing and then moving forward into a more just or open kind of understanding of the world, or these kind of ideas and things. So that's kind of, and that's a quick version of the philosophical roots of that word deconstruction. But I think it's taken on more of a popular meaning, which is to question your faith, or to question the received ideas that you've been given on any kind of topic, is that you're deconstructing the things that you've been received. And so it just kind of sometimes just means doubting. So now deconstruction just means doubting, which could be bad, or I mean, could be good, but it could also be bad. I hear some people, they just kind of now use deconstruction as like a lifestyle choice. Well, I'm just kind of deconstructing everything. Like, I'm just kind of like, I don't really know. I'm just kind of throwing everything up in the air, and I don't take kind of a commitment or a stand. And I think that's good, for a season. But that's not good for a life. And so those are kind of some of the ways that these things have been used. And I know the two of us, we kind of met a long time ago, when kind of the evangelical church in the early 2000s was often called the emerging church, like they were deconstructing their faith. And so I think for me, I was in seminary, and one of the worst things that, something I heard, and just to name names, but John Piper came to the school I was at, and he said, it's a sin to doubt God. It's a sin to question God's existence, or to question who God is or what God is doing in the world. We need to have faith.
Right.
And I was a new seminary student, and I, like, my brain, I didn't actually raise my hand, but I was like, excuse me, Mr. Piper. And in my heart, I was like, have you read the Psalms? Because I hear the Psalms. And just to be clear, Sean, the Psalms are in the Bible. I was like,
last I checked,
yeah, they're in the Bible. They're like right in the middle. They're hard to miss. I was like, a lot of people.
Let me double check real quick.
Okay. What page is it? But, and so for me, that was like, there's something not quite right here. Like, we should be able to ask questions. We should wrestle like Isaac, or Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, right? Wrestling with God. Like, what does that mean? So anyhow, these are some of the things that I'm kind of bringing to this conversation, but it's a difficult kind of path, and we can kind of get stuck on this being too certain side. We can get stuck on the doubting everything side.
Right.
So there was that kind of an example that prompted this week's discussion that kind of came out. There's been a lot of high profile kind of people losing their faith, stepping away from faith. So there's kind of one that just kind of happened. You want to walk us through that?
Yeah. So, I mean, and if you follow Christian Twitter, the Christian world, some of these, and I think they mirror, what's interesting to me about them is that they mirror real life experiences of people that we know and probably know pretty closely. So I think maybe a year ago, 18 months ago, somewhere, like Joshua Harris, who wrote the book I Kissed Dating Goodbye, and then went into ministry, very kind of hardcore neo-reformed guy, later abandoned the things that he wrote in I Kissed Dating Goodbye and apologized, kind of went on an apology tour. I think there were also some blowback at his church. There were some things that happened around some sexual misconduct, not by him, but another staff member, if I'm remembering that correctly. If I'm not, someone in the comments help me out. So and so he leaves the faith and says, I can't do this anymore. He divorces his wife. But this most recently, Jonathan Steingard, who was lead singer of Hawk Nelson, wrote a long Instagram post, which I find just hilarious in the first place, that you would write a post on Instagram. But that's beside the point. And he basically says, hey, I'm leaving because I don't believe this anymore. And it's kind of heralded in popular media as coming out as non-Christian, which again, I find just humorous. But what I found fascinating was that when these things happen, both the people who are enduring them and the folks who are around them act like this is the first time that this has happened, and that there are no helps, no guardrails that would be able to help him walk through. So he points out like these markers in his journey. And basically it starts with one that he started to experience doubts, raised in a Christian home, raised in a Christian church. And he starts to experience doubts that he doesn't have an answer for. Then after that, he talks to his friends and finds out that they share some of the same doubts that he has. And they also, like him, don't have an answer for. And then he talks to his father-in-law, who is a pastor. And his father-in-law gives him a lot of runaround about the King James Bible and Greek, but he finds those answers unsatisfactory. And so he turns in the end and says, like, I got to bail on the whole project, the whole Christian project. So he says he describes it as like a sweater that you pull a thread on, the whole thing begins to unravel. And this is a guy who joined Hawk Nelson when he was 20 years old. And kind of immersed in the Christian subculture. And he says in the post, like, I was raised to believe that the Bible was the perfect word of God. And then he started to read the Bible and see contradictions. Lots of things that tons of other people have experienced. Reading the Old Testament, how do we hold that? How do we weigh that? How do we read particularly the Canaanite conquest narratives? What to do with all of that? And that being, in his view, somehow at odds with Jesus and God in the New Testament. And every time this happens, Geoff, I want to say to people who are in this experience, like, is that all?
Is that all? Hey, don't be so dismissive of people's doubts.
No,
real struggle.
No, I don't want to be dismissive of their doubts, but I do want to say, hey, there are people who love you and who have dug into these questions very deeply. And there are ways to go through this process. Virtually everybody who goes to seminary, I think most, especially if you go to any sort of legitimate, just like non-concretized dogmatic time to seminary, and there are plenty of those out there, have gone through this on some level. And so you mentioned earlier Hermeneutics of Suspicion. Well, there's a guy named Paul Ricoeur who developed this thing that folks like me and you talk about all the time when we talk about the hermeneutical circle. And like, it's got a lot of different movements in it that most of us go through, but there are three big ones. And the first is what's called the First Naivete. And in the First Naivete, you just receive symbols and accept what's been said. It's full of lots of opinions and lots of assumptions. And you just take that entire construct as truth. Those are the folks out there who are still like arguing for a literal creation. Like they have to do a literal 7-day creation. They're doing a whole lot of jumps through Genesis 1 through 11, lots of other things. They're the ones, young earth creationists, all that sort of stuff. But not in the sense that they've really delved into it. They're just accepting it as is without very much questioning. And then you enter in what I think Steingart entered into, which is the critical phase. And in the critical phase, that's what people say, like you started us out with, saying like, I'm deconstructing. And in that critical phase, you begin to question those symbols and those words, and you develop what you began us with, was the hermeneutics of suspicion. And the problem that a lot of us experience, not everybody that's in deconstruction, but what I see kind of on the front ground is that people get stuck in the critical phase.
Right. And
so early in the critical phase, there are things that sound really appealing to you. Like, oh man, it's not about the right answers. It's about asking the right questions. Well, that's great. That's really healthy. We all need to do that. And that needs to stay a part of us forever, like asking the right questions. But there are some things out there that actually do have answers, in the sense that you could have what Newbegin calls, I read it over the weekend because you told me to, that you could actually have proper confidence in, right? Like, and then what exactly is confidence versus what is certainty? But we get stuck in that critical phase. And that's when folks say, I'm done with the whole project, because because we're in the first naivete, we are in love with answers. In this critical phase, we fall in love with questions. and just, man, that's the right question, or he asking right, and that's just, both of those just become an interior speaking loop, right?
Mm.
But what Ricoeur points out is like, if you follow it to the bottom. So Seth Godin, who's a marketer, wrote this book called The Dip, and he says in every endeavor, you start out here and you're really excited and you're learning things, you're growing, and then in everything you do, whether it's starting a business, whatever it is, there's a dip. And most people quit during the dip, when it's not fun anymore, when it's hard, when you have more questions, you have answers, it doesn't seem like it's working. And he says, when it feels like it's about to collapse is almost always when it's about to start working, right? And so then, like, and the critical phase in my mind is like the dip. But after you come out of the dip, Ricoeur says that you enter into what he calls the second naivete, which you still keep all of those questions, but you step into a world and you behave as if that world is true. And the test of its authenticity becomes in testing the truthfulness of that word and world. So this is what Dallas Willard would point to when he says things like, hey, if you want to know if Christianity is true, like, pick something that Jesus says to do and do it.
Yes.
And see if that works. Right. And what I find interesting, and obviously, again, this isn't everybody's deconstructive path, is, Richard Rohr talks about the triangle, right? And that's made of the tricycle: experience, tradition, and Bible. And almost all of the popularized deconstruction stories, and even the people who are really making their name just doing podcasts that are functionally, swimming around in the critical phase pool, navel gazing, all of those people.
You're not naming names now, though.
I'm not naming names, but all of those people are putting the entire weight of their faith simply on the Bible, deconstructing the Bible. And like, he's not. So my question, like, if I sit down with some of these people, let's talk about your experience of God. Let's talk about the tradition. What has the tradition said about the questions that you're troubled with? What has your experience of Jesus said? And that's not, I don't say that in a pejorative sense about folks, but that is what I mean by what I have seen is a lot of deconstruction isn't deconstruction of the faith. It's deconstruction of fundamentalism. Right. Like, they're leaving fundamentalism. They're not leaving the faith. So I took way too long to talk about that.
Well, no, that's good. So I think that's why I talked about, like, deconstructing as detoxing from fundamentalism or from a certain kind of modernist way of understanding Christianity. And what I think the trap is that people who are deconstructing their fundamentalist rigid answers, they'll just exchange one search for certainty for another search for certainty. So, the Bible's not true, and young Earth and 7-day creationism is not true. I used to be certain about that, but now I'm certain that evolution is true in every which way, and that the Bible should be thrown out because I've exchanged one certainty for another certainty. What would be another one? That, like, every single part of the Bible is literally true as I read it. I'm certain about that. 2, I'm certain that the Bible is full of human corruption and deceit, so I can't trust any of it. And so we go from one certainty to another, and we're just exchanging one fundamentalism maybe on the right for another fundamentalism on the left. And what Ricoeur is arguing for, and what I think we want to propose, is like, we actually need a wholesale shift from certainty seeking, which I think kind of prompts a lot of deconstruction, is that they had these certainties that then fell apart. So can we talk? I had like 2 or 3 kind of helpful shifts, and then maybe you can comment on. So coming from Leslie Newbegin in his book Proper Confidence, which I dropped in the comments, he says, well, we need to move from seeking certainty in all things, which is like 100% confidence, to confidence, which is like a well-established kind of understanding of things. And he says that we move from certainty of facts to confidence in people. And I think that is, for me, a fundamental shift, is that we navigate our entire lives with a certain level of confidence that comes nowhere near scientific certainty in all things. I believe that I'm my mom's child, right? She said, you came out of me. It's like, I haven't verified that, right? I haven't talked to all the doctors. I haven't even looked at the birth certificates, right? So,
but your experience of your mom speaks to that being that you having confidence in that belief. The other things that she has done, say, yeah,
absolutely. And we live, a lot of, I'm confident that people are going to stay on the other side of the yellow line when I drive. Like, I haven't checked everybody's, driver history, but, we all have these agreements that, I drive on the right side of the road and you drive on the other side of the road and we don't hit each other. Right. So we have all these, we navigate our lives with a certain level of confidence, not absolute certainty. But then but we've also been given this sense, in the modern sense of faith, coupled with the kind of search for scientific certainty, that when it comes to faith, you do need to be certain. Otherwise, it all like evaporates. So Leslie Newbegin and others say, well, that's not really how faith works. Like, it's called faith. It's not called certainty. And he talks about how, the modern world kind of came out of this need to get rid of doubt and all these things, but we won't get into all that now. We'll probably talk about a little bit on Wednesday. The other thing that I kind of mentioned is shifting from the certainty of facts to confidence in persons. So if you listed all the facts about me, I'm 6'3", I weigh, roughly 170. I'm 42 years old. Like, you could list all the scientific facts about me, but as a person, you won't know that much about me. And so the thing is persons reveal themselves slowly in relationship, over time. And I, as a person, am kind of in control about what I reveal to you, as all you listeners, or you, Sean, right? So I don't know everything about Sean, because he hasn't chosen to reveal those things to me. It's going to take a while for the two of us to get to know each other in the show. And it takes a while for relationships to develop. And when it comes to God, I think sometimes we forget is that we seek for God to be a list of facts that we can know about in a detached kind of way. And when we apply our certain tests, but the truth is God, if we believe God is a person, which I do, then that's going to take a while to unfold. And I need to be committed to that relationship. And so a lot of times I hear people say, well, I'm kind of deconstructing everything. What they really mean is I'm kind of stepping back from pursuing faith at all. Like, I'm just going to kind of sit back and see what happens, because my questions haven't been answered. And these certainties over here, I find unconvincing. And so now I'm just going to sit back and not pursue a relationship. And it's like, well, that's a sure path to losing your faith or leaving Christianity, because you're not, but you haven't replaced that with the search. So those are the two. The last one that I was going to say, you already mentioned, which is move from theory into practice. Like, just try to do the stuff, see what happens.
Yeah. And I like what you said about the idea of persons, because that's the revelation of God in the scriptures is as a person. Like, and, not to overplay the personal relationship aspect. I don't want people to hear that, but like the power of incarnation really does matter more than just an avenue to eventually get Jesus up on the cross. That God is I mean, how many people heard sermons yesterday about Abba Father, right? Like, because that's just an easy lever to pull on Father's Day. But there is a relational aspect there that God intends. But I think also we have abandoned the idea, I think largely in society, in the power of belief, like other than just like sports teams, right? Like, we believe, and like, I believe that, and we just say, oh man, just that's not textured enough. It's not complex enough for us to believe, for us to develop confidence in a belief. And like, one of the things that Newbegin says in Proper Confidence, since you gave a quote, I'm going to give a quote as well. That I just found really great. He says, one does not learn anything by believing something, and conversely, if one doubts everything, one does not learn anything except by believing something. And conversely, if one doubts everything, one learns nothing. On the other hand, believing everything uncritically is the road to disaster. The faculty of doubt is essential, but as I have argued, rational doubt always rests on faith and not vice versa. The relationship between the two cannot be reversed. And so I feel like one of the moves that we have tried to make in late modern, postmodern people is the belief that doubt will lead us to confidence, that doubt will lead us to faith. And I don't think that we know that as experientially true, because like I believe in the power of question and doubt, right? But I also believe that at the end of the day, you have to do something, which means you have to trust in some basic realities to be true. And like, so if I were to sit down, or when I do sit down with folks who feel like their deconstruction is leading them away from faith, my response is never, oh no, hold on to your faith. These are the things that you can trust in. My response is, you need to follow that trail all the way down and see where it goes. Like, don't be a dabbler at doubting. Don't be a dabbler at your faith.
I like that.
Like, go ahead and investigate it and see where it leads. Because that's what we have. Like, if we can throw up as many doubts and questions, which again, I want to say that I believe are good and healthy in so many ways, then we don't ever have to actually deal with, it's another way of avoidance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just as I think both an unhealthy certainty and an unhealthy questioning both lead us away from God, in that they keep us disengaged from God.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I like that. Don't be a dabbler in doubting, because I do think that sometimes deconstruction starts in earnest, but then fades quickly to, oh, I just don't know. I'm just too busy. I'd rather just do, and we just kind of go off. And so I like that commitment. A lot of times when people say they're deconstructing their faith, I kind of want to ask, well, did you ever construct your faith on the firsthand? Like, have you put in the work to, in a sense, really get to know these questions? Or did you just kind of like receive these things uncritically altogether, and now you're just kind of giving them up? And so for me, when people say, I'm deconstructing my faith, I want to join them and be like, okay, let's do this. Let's tear things down and then let's build. I think, yeah. So
it's easy to get talked out of something that you were never talked into.
Yeah. Right. Well, and we'll kind of talk more about this, I think, on Wednesday. But going back to the Bible is I just tell people, hey, the early church, they read the Bible because they already believed in Jesus and they already lived in the power of the Holy Spirit.
Right.
But now a lot of people are told you have to believe in the Bible so that you can know the Spirit, so that you can know what Jesus did. And so you believe in the Bible first so that you can believe in Jesus. And I just want to tell people that's where the facts and the like get backwards.
Right.
But the early church didn't have the Bible. And even when they did have the Bible, they already had the communal experience of Jesus's presence and the power of the Spirit. And that's what they believed in. And that's what they experienced. And then they kept going back to the Bible to reinforce and to help them understand those things. And so I just try to say, hey, the persons, the people, the God, triune, Father, Son, and Spirit is what we believe in. And then the Bible helps support us understand that. But too often we see it in the reverse way.
And I just got through teaching a Bible for Beginners class in our church. And we started out, and I think this is probably the most mind-blowing place, which I said the church created the Bible didn't create the church. Like, people had an experience of God and the Holy Spirit that they thought, hey, somebody should write this down. Like, we should capture all of this. And that's what gave rise to the Bible. It wasn't that there was this book floating around and people said, oh, we should do all that stuff. And so it begins in a place, the experience of God begins with the tradition and the actual experience. And that gives rise to the Bible, just like you were saying. Most people in the history of the world have been Christian without being able to read the Bible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Than with being able to read it. And I think that's a fundamental difficulty folks have now, is that someone has told them that, they should believe the Bible. It was like a guy came into my office when I was living in California years ago, and he just was not a textbook father. He wasn't really a textbook anything else that you'd want. He was a counterexample. All right. In it, just about every way. And he's like, I was telling my friends, he pointed in my Bible, that I raised my kids according to that book right there. And I was like, really? Because there's not a whole lot in that book right there directly about raising children. like that. But that's the imagination, is like the Bible is a user's manual. And if you just if you just work it right, then you'll get healthy outcomes. That's not what the writers of the Bible were envisioning. I don't think that's what God was envisioning. But anyway, I digress.
Well, no, we probably should spend a whole week, maybe a weekly theme on what is the Bible, because people have lots of those questions, and it is part of the process of deconstruction. So we'll definitely need to circle around back to that, because I heard from Sean, I heard from you that the Bible is just a human document, that, the church is in charge, so, and that you don't believe in the word of God anymore. So that's kind of what I heard.
Is that what you heard?
No. But, but some people hear that when they hear things like, the church came first and the Bible came second, they hear things like, well, what does that mean for the word of God? And those do need to be nuanced, right? We need to go through that critical journey.
Yeah. I mean, it's a historical fact, but still we can have the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Well, good. So
Jesus ascends to heaven and a Bible comes floating down.
Yeah. Well, I was raised, and this is part of my own, and I don't know if I called it deconstruction, but my own development of faith was to realize that I was raised with the Holy Trinity of the Father, Son, and Holy Scriptures, and that's kind of my understanding of the doctrine of God. So one, that just leaves the Holy Spirit out, and it elevates the Bible too much. So that's how I was raised, right? So I had to go through a process of needing to change that. Other people, if you're charismatic and Pentecostal, then you have no Bible. You just have the experiences of some divine, kind of power, and then God speaks to you, which I believe God speaks to us, but it's not coupled with the Bible, right? So we all need to kind of find these pieces and integrate them a lot better. Just stepped on my cord. So Wednesday, we were going to talk about how do people kind of enter into maybe, and this is where we're going to kind of bring some spiritual direction, but also just kind of our own understanding. How do people start faith, deconstructing faith crisis, and things like that? And then on Friday, again, we will be talking about kind of depression, dark night of the soul. How do these kind of fit together?
Right.
So I'm excited about those. If any of you kind of have your own sense, please throw it in the comments. And again, we do, we read
the comments.
We do read the comments. Well, I read them. Sean says he doesn't, but the only way people are going to find out about this show is if you share it. So please share and subscribe. If you have trouble finding the show, like I did this morning and I could not share it, be sure to like the Missio Alliance Facebook page, as well as subscribe to us on YouTube if you find us on the Palmer and Holsclaw show. And otherwise, have a great day. Any last thoughts, Sean?
No, we'll see you on Wednesday.
All right. Now, Sean, we can all see you dancing. Everybody can still see
I know,
you
I did that for everybody.
Okay, good. All right, everybody. See you later.